Do the words Kony 2012 mean anything to you? If not, you probably weren't between 10 to 20 years old in 2012. And if that phrase does trigger memories, you might be taken back to a time when you felt swindled by a passionate online activist and a slickly edited YouTube documentary. At the beginning of the 2010s, social media ushered in a new era of how we connected to each other. All of a sudden, we had access to the entire world at our fingertips and in our pockets or wherever you kept your phone. You could send a direct message to your favorite artist, share videos of cats playing piano to your coworkers, and tell the entire world that your relationship status was complicated. This era of social media was optimistic and good-natured, mainly used to spread positivity, make people laugh, and form genuine connections. Those were the days. Even the art coming out during the time reflected a more united America. Films such as The Avengers cemented Marvel's vision of an interconnecting storytelling universe. Water cooler television shows like Game of Thrones and Girls sparked significant cultural conversation. And even gaming embraced mobile phones and social media. Remember that aunt on Facebook who just couldn't stop leveling up on Candy Crush? And also telling you about it for some reason? And a generation of young people, mostly millennials, were ready to take charge and create the world they believed in. Paired with emerging technologies like Instagram, YouTube, and Facebook, we were now more connected to each other than ever before. So how did a short documentary, within days of premiering, become one of the most viral, most liked, and most viewed videos at the time, only to fail and become the cautionary tale in online activism? Even an impact campaign with support from the likes of Rihanna, Justin Bieber, and Oprah Winfrey couldn't shield itself from its critics. And keep in mind, this was the early 2010s. People like Rihanna, Bieber, and Oprah was like, presidents or something. The rise and fall of the viral phenomenon known as Kony 2012 is a fascinating early look into how people thought online engagement could lead to social change and posits if it's possible to advocate without oversimplifying till the message loses all meaning. Does this oversimplification lead to more unintentional harm than intended good? Well, it's a paradox that has repeated itself many times since. And as online discourse becomes even more politicized, it's one that's unlikely to stop. Hello everybody. Today we're going to be talking about how one man's campaign to make an African warlord the most popular man in the world horrifically backfired. Kony 2012 was such a strange time on the internet. I was barely young enough to remember it, and I'm sure a lot of you do not. Actually, that was 13 years ago. There's a solid chance several people watching this video weren't alive yet. Wow. I'm sure you're all familiar with at least one instance of an online fundraiser or a GoFundMe or a social justice campaign going horrifically wrong. Well, Kony 2012 was the first to do that and by far the biggest. So today we're going to be talking about what they were advocating for in the first place, how everything went so wrong, and how unbelievably wrong it went. It will go from international politics to a man completely naked running down the side of the road in California. So we're going to go ahead and get into it, but as always, thank you for watching. In 2003, while most people were lining up in bookstores to buy the 5th Harry Potter book and packing theaters to go see Finding Nemo, college students Jason Russell, Bobby Bailey, and Lauren Poole traveled to Africa to film a documentary about the war in Darfur in the western region of Sudan. During their travels in northern Uganda, they began documenting the conflict happening in the area. After the president Yoweri Museveni took control of Uganda in 1986, he faced opposition from many armed rebel forces in the north. One of them, the Lord's Resistance Army, or the LRA, was led by a man named Joseph Kony. Kony and the LRA set themselves apart from the other rebel groups via their unique ideology and notoriously violent tactics. If you've never heard of Kony 2012, this has got to be a trip. We started out talking about Candy Crush and Facebook, and now we're talking about ultra-violent African paramilitary groups. I swear they're connected, just give me a second. The LRA often abducted children, turning boys into child soldiers and girls into slaves. This led to something called the night commute, in which young children left their villages at night and trekked to larger cities to sleep, where the risk of LRA abduction was lessened. The night commute was specifically what Russell, Bailey, and Poole began documenting. In fact, the image of children commuting to safety left such an impact on the three students that they made a documentary film when they returned called Invisible Children. The title's profound impact on the trio would later be used as the official name for their organization and the group responsible for Kony 2012. The documentary, Invisible Children, also referred to as Invisible Children: The Rough Cut, was first screened on June 22, 2004 at the University of San Diego. The film was so impactful that many of the college students at the screening felt compelled to join the cause. Margie Dillenberg, a San Diego teacher, recognized the emotional response from the audience and thought, quote, "These people," referring to the audience, "are going to be worse off if we don't provide them constructive engagement." Dillenberg was one of Invisible Children's early staff members and was in charge of spreading the word about the cause, while Russell, Bailey, and Poole went back to work on making another film. I mean, of course, the story itself is so tragic, and anyone with a heart would want to help these kids. It's understandable why there was such a push towards this endeavor. Inspired by her background in education, Dillenberg started advocating on behalf of the group at various schools. This led to her developing Invisible Children's roadie model, in which members traveled around America sharing the story of Kony and the LRA. There was also a heavy recruitment component of this model. On the surface, there were definitely shades of MLM or pyramid scheme type activity, but as a registered nonprofit, Invisible Children's purpose was primarily humanitarian work and not profit for individual distributors. Which is good that it was that way, and would be bad if it was not that way. Unlike an MLM, their recruiting structure did not promise a commission to new recruits. However, they were very strategic in their recruiting, targeting students and a younger, more easily influenced crowd. Hiring was done twice a year to align with the fall and spring semesters, and new members trained for a month in San Diego. This was where recruits learned the history of Invisible Children, Joseph Kony and the LRA, and the colonization of Africa. The remaining time was spent booking events at various schools, as each recruit had to fill a quota of around 50 screenings, showing Invisible Children as well as footage that would later become the documentary film Kony 2012. Filling this quota was the main priority, and members who hit those quotas were rewarded with a big party at the end of each semester. Literally the sell enough box tops and get a pizza party thing. As mentioned, most of the recruits or roadies were young people already taking a gap year before, during, or after college, and they were not paid. Roadies were expected to fundraise $1,500 before the program began, which was used to support the organization's various programs and to cover expenses while they were on the road. But after its second year, Invisible Children had grown so rapidly that they no longer needed to recruit. The organization could simply open themselves to applications and would have a large pool of talent from which to choose from. The roadies' duties were to recruit participants for massive fundraising and awareness events. And on April 29th, 2006, Invisible Children hosted their first national event, the Global Night Commute. The event involved 125 cities around the United States. An estimated 80,000 teens and 20-somethings walked from their meeting places to city centers in solidarity with the night commuters of Africa. I mean, can you even think of something similar to this in the past several years? Feels impossible by today's standards. According to Jedediah Jenkins, a former member of Invisible Children, quote, "Teams of roadies were 3 people, mostly from America, some from New Zealand, some from Canada, and then every team had one person from Uganda on them, and that person had a personal connection to the conflict and the Lord's Resistance Army." During these screenings, the Ugandan team members shared stories with the audience of horrific situations they experienced as children, such as exposure to warfare, the oftentimes violent abduction itself, and even being forced to kill their families or other children. I think it's safe to say a lot of the younger people here didn't really understand the disconnect between activism and raising awareness. Like, it's really cool that they're all marching down the street and it's for a good cause and they're learning about, a horrific thing happening on the other side of the world, but that's not really going to magically save a bunch of children. It's a great first step, but that step needs to go somewhere. Dillenberg recalls of the event, quote, "The day after, we thought, yay, it's over. Naively, we thought one event would end the war." I mean, sure, they had learned about it, but that does nothing unless you do something with it. So a second national event was scheduled, which aimed to bring attention to displacement camps. Camps people are forced to live in after being removed from their home. Again, according to Dillenberg, quote, "We had people stay in the field overnight, build cardboard villages to understand, not to understand because you can never fully understand the experience of a displaced person, but to do it in solidarity." Okay. So the first national march, I can see the vision a little bit. It's like all these small children, according to the documentary, have to walk to cities so they aren't abducted in the middle of the night. That's tragic. So we're going to have a march in the middle of the night where we hear from people who experience this to educate each other. Sure, makes sense. But now, But now, because there are people who are forced out of their homes and have to live in cardboard huts, we're going to go camping in like a public area where it's completely safe and nothing bad will happen. And we're going to do that in solidarity. And it's also funny because, like, you know, the people in displacement camps in Uganda aren't going to see this. This is entirely to make you feel better. The first one made some sense because there was like learning and actual like speakers at those events. And the purpose of the walk is to ingrain in yourself that other people have to do this for survival. But now you're just camping. That doesn't like teach you perspective on anything, because again, you're totally safe when you're doing it, which I guess you were also totally safe during the night commute. But again, there was like an illusion of connection there. But this isn't teaching anything. And also, if the Ugandans were able to see this, do you think they'd be like, oh, cool, they're doing it too? Right on. Camping out with your friends for the night before you go back to your air-conditioned house seems like something to make you feel better rather than to, you know, do stuff. A key component to the success of these Invisible Children events was their emphasis on visual presentation. Visually appealing and often taking place outdoors, the events were crowd-driven and colorful. At the time, Instagram was still in its infancy, and Twitter was just starting to become a household name, and in this rapidly growing era of social media, this was essential to their growth. Participants shared photos and videos with the world, and Invisible Children used it to their advantage, like free marketing, to spread their message outside of school presentations. Most notably, on April 25th, 2009, the group hosted an international event called The Rescue. With over 85,000 attendees in 100 cities in 10 countries, Invisible Children asked participants to, quote, abduct themselves for the abducted. Oh no. The actual participants, young people, and you'll see why, publicly camped out at a specific location until they were publicly rescued by a celebrity, some of whom included Kristen Bale and Oprah Winfrey. After being rescued, participants would head to another location. Eventually, on May 1st, 2009, everyone landed in Chicago outside of Oprah Winfrey's studio and filmed a message which she later shared on her media company's official website, OWN. Okay, now we're just cosplaying. This started with like, hey, here's a documentary about these poor children that are put in the worst situations imaginable, where they have to, you know, turn their bodies into slavery and they have to murder other children to survive. And it's like, wow, that's really bad. And now it's, what if we pretended to be these kidnapped children, but Bella from Twilight saves us. And it's funny too, because this is in such an early age of the internet, because like now we have countless examples of bad charity groups or bad fundraisers that even the concept of this sounds like a horrible idea. But this worked super well. Everyone got in on it. As we're going to see, it was one of the biggest things, not only on YouTube, but in media at the time. And it's almost cute to look at all of the now obvious mistakes and pandering nature of it, that everyone had to learn every problem with it all at once. Momentum was building though. Every young person in the world was using Facebook, and the influence of social media had supporters buying into the cause. The timing couldn't have been better. And as Jedediah Jenkins recalls, quote, it was this dawn of the internet where the world was connected. I had friends in Ugandans who were messaging. I have friends in Ugandans. Who are messaging me on Facebook every day, and I'm like, this is my friend. It was the techno-optimism era, and we felt like this flashpoint of that moment. Techno-optimism is a hilarious word for the opposite of whatever we have right now. In 2006, the same year as the global night commute, over 600 supporters met with congressional staff, urging them to send troops to Uganda to put pressure on Kony. Following these meetings, several members of Congress called for a diplomatic envoy to Uganda, and in 2010, President Obama signed the LRA Disarmament and Northern Uganda Recovery Act into law. And in 2011, the administration sent 100 armed troops to assist regional forces, including the Ugandan Army and the Sudan People's Liberation Army, to find and remove Joseph Kony from the battlefield. This is great, right? Like, people learning about it has now become people doing something about it. That's the goal. Well, at least that was the thought. The bill had 267 bipartisan co-sponsors, and at the time was the most widely supported Africa-focused legislation in U.S. history. Well, there were critics of the bill who pointed out that the Ugandan army and other regional armies being assisted now by the United States were also accused of employing child soldiers, as well as a ton of other human rights violations. So not great to start sending them money and guns. Some theorize the measure was an easy public relations win for Congress as well as the president, placating these very public demonstrations making the rounds on social media. After all, the US had long been supportive of Uganda in its fight against the LRA, providing intelligence and other resources. And Uganda had assisted in fighting al-Shabaab, a group that had ties to al-Qaeda in Somalia, which was certainly in the United States' interest. So since we were already working together, the bill seemed to be a publicity stunt to some. And although helpful, the 100 troops was a relatively small amount, and more than anything, may have best served to make headlines and show the American public that Congress and the president were doing something about the man that so many people had been hearing about. Despite these criticisms, by the 2010s, the combination of roadie screenings, national events, and congressional lobbying laid the groundwork for Invisible Children's mega viral film still yet to come. And that film was, of course, Kony 2012. The original vision for Kony 2012 was different from the final product. Until that point, Invisible Children's documentaries only ran about half an hour long. Kony 2012 was going to be their first feature-length documentary, with the intent of submitting it to film festivals. The organization had tried that with their titular first film, Invisible Children, but the Sundance Film Festival didn't want it, and most people didn't want to sit through a sad documentary about hurting children. Another factor that helped shape Kony 2012 was, oddly enough, the killing of Osama bin Laden and the subsequent media coverage surrounding the event. The speed and decentralization of Facebook and Twitter provided instant updates to global events like these. Even a Pakistani man unknowingly live tweeted the raid as it happened outside his home in Abbottabad. With all this user-driven content and a younger audience reach, bin Laden's death fostered jokes, memes, and hoaxes that flooded social media. This made Osama bin Laden a superstar. According to Jenkins, one of Invisible Children's policy partners in DC, quote, "I just wish Kony was famous because we spend so much time telling people about this. We have to first educate them and then get them activated." So the goal for Kony 2012 was clear. Make Joseph Kony famous, then make him infamous. When Invisible Children toured and screened their films, they sold copies of the films as DVDs for $15. Which went towards building schools, jobs, and a warning radio network in Uganda to help protect people from LRA movements. However, for Kony 2012, they decided to shift their strategy. If they allowed people to watch the film for free, word might spread faster, helping them achieve their goal of making Joseph Kony infamous. To give some context and a quick trip down memory lane, viral videos around this time included 2010's Double Rainbow, Rebecca Black's music video for Friday, and 2012's Ain't Nobody Got Time for That, the last of which dropped only a month after Kony 2012. This was a new wave of YouTube virality, and Invisible Children sought to ride that wave. According to Jenkins, Invisible Children didn't know what to expect, but their goal was to get 500,000 views. To them, 500,000 views meant 500,000 people were going to know who Kony was. With awareness as their driving force, hitting this goal would go a long way towards achieving that. But in just 4 days, 500,000 views would seem paltry in comparison to what they would accomplish. The title of the film itself, Kony 2012, was named to make Joseph Kony a household name and to bring him to justice by the end of that year. The film begins with a quote. Which, like, okay. Again, like, it's so funny that any of this would immediately get dogged on if it came out today. But in 2012, they were breaking new ground. The film shifts to Jason Russell, the director and co-founder of Invisible Children, who introduces the birth story of his baby boy, Gavin. We are then quickly introduced to Jacob Akaye, a Ugandan boy, through voiceover narration by Russell. He says that he and Jacob met in Uganda, and Jacob represents the suffering and fear all Ugandan children face. Jacob details his experience having to run from his small village to a busier, more populated city to make it harder for the LRA to abduct him and force him to be a soldier. Jacob recounts witnessing the LRA kill his brother as he was trying to escape their army. In the background, Russell tells Jacob that he will find a way to stop them. The film features several shots of large concrete rooms packed with sleeping children. These are the night commuters, taking shelter in secure quarters set up by the government. On the subject of Joseph Kony and the LRA, the main narrative highlights the importance of young Americans in the fight against him.
In order for the people to care, they have to know. And they will only know if Kony's name is everywhere.
And while some action had been taken by Congress and President Obama, Kony was still alive and on the run and leading the LRA's forces several months later. Depending on what you believe about invisible children and Jason Russell, it was also undeniable that this movement had grown to tremendous heights and raised a ton of money along with it. Losing the enthusiasm and fundraising of the young generation would potentially mean the end of invisible children itself. The film's strategy and call to action can be summarized by this quote: "In order to find him, Kony, they need technology and training to track him in a vast jungle. That's where American advisors come in. For American advisors to be there, the US government has to deploy them." Kony 2012 warns its audience that in order for the Ugandan army to arrest Kony, they'll need more help from American advisors, and that the mission can only be successful if this help is given or it will be canceled. It was an emotionally manipulative tactic aimed at impressionable young Americans who wanted to feel like they could make a difference. Allison Decker, who was a 19-year-old sophomore at Northwestern University in 2012, said, quote, "Their call to action is to make this guy famous. Something as simple as sharing a video makes it really easy to help their cause and raise awareness." Decker also posits that Kony 2012 was so impactful, especially to young people, because they could identify with Kony's victims, who were children. Quote, "It tugs on your heartstrings. You just passed out of that phase of childhood and you can't imagine being a child soldier." The documentary also highlights something called the International Criminal Court, whose mission is to catch and put to trial, quote, "the world's worst criminals." Kony was the first person ever to be indicted by the ICC, and although Russell and his partners approached the US government in 2008 requesting their help to solve this issue, they were told, quote, "There is no way the United States will ever get involved in a conflict where our national security or financial interest aren't at stake. No administration would do enough to stop this because it's simply not on the radar of foreign policy." Perhaps in another attempt to drum up support, the film included a clip of a child soldier who had apparently escaped the LRA. This child reported that Kony had become aware of the United States' efforts to stop him and would be adjusting his tactics to evade capture. Invisible children then unveiled their solution to stop him: the power of the hashtag. Wow, 2012, a different world. Their strategy was to target 20 culture makers who they believed would bring further awareness to the issue. This included Taylor Swift, George Clooney, Jay-Z, Ellen DeGeneres, and quarterback Tim Tebow. I mean, sure, a lot of people know him, but I don't know if I'd call him like the top 20. Which it also shows, again, education and like awareness is valuable if you do something with it. But it shows where their mind is at, that they are telling everyone to go contact these celebrities. I feel like, again, that's something that would immediately get shut down today. And they were right. Everyone from Justin Bieber to Kim Kardashian and Kendall Jenner shared hashtag Kony 2012 on social media. From there, this seemingly random phrase began trending all over Twitter. I also feel obligated to mention that one of the celebrities who was asked to share the hashtag and did share it was P. Diddy. I personally can't imagine anyone who would be better fit to speak against the horrors of human trafficking. But again, there was criticism over this awareness campaign and what the movement actually accomplished. I mean, most people had no idea what hashtag Kony 2012 even meant. All they knew was that the likes of Justin Bieber and the Kardashians, of whom many people perceived as being out of touch and self-serving, were making a half-baked attempt to tell us to care. As this was merely about awareness, there seemed to be a lack of action behind it, specifically as it applied to these so-called culture makers. You know how like the ALS Ice Bucket Challenge, which a lot of you probably don't remember. But with the Ice Bucket Challenge, the point originally was you donate money and pour ice on yourself and then get other people to donate and pour ice on themselves. Well, the whole donation part quit, so it just became people saying ALS Ice Bucket Challenge and then pouring ice on themselves, and that was it. So that like started out with good intentions, but then people kind of, dropped the part about donating. Kony 2012 started there with just hey, tell people about this. Good job. In the final part of the film, Russell tells viewers how they can join the cause. People could buy an action box, which contained posters and 2 unique bracelets with their own ID number that could be entered onto a website to officially join the mission. The film also told viewers their efforts would culminate on one day, April 20th, 2012, for something called Cover the Night. On this night, volunteers would canvass across America, putting up posters emblazoned with Kony's face and name and hashtag Kony 2012 on every street in every major city. Russell believed that, quote, the rest of the world will go to sleep and wake up to hundreds of thousands of posters demanding justice on every corner. Kony 2012 ends with a call to action to donate and share the video on social media. In contrast to their first film, titled Invisible Children, Kony 2012 was a significant departure in point of view and tone. In Invisible Children, Russell and his co-founders are presented as naive but well-intentioned college kids accidentally stumbling onto a war, while Kony 2012 depicts Russell as a leader of a movement and a father. Quote from Henry Jenkins, when he teaches his 5-year-old son about Joseph Kony being the bad guy, it's not clear with whom young viewers most identify, with the 30-something-year-old dad or with the innocent but earnest 5-year-old. Criticism remained. Not only had Russell seemingly made the issue about himself, many argued that they were dramatically oversimplifying a very complex issue. I mean, obviously child soldiers are bad, that's pretty simple, but oversimplifying what people can do to stop it and implying that it would just take a few letters or complaints to Congress to make it all go away, even though it's a very complicated geopolitical issue. Invisible Children's director of communications at the time, Noel West, said, quote, we've always simplified the issue down to a very understandable, non-academic, non-complex issue. But for us, that is just the entry point. We're trying to attract people into this issue, but make it accessible for them. Kony 2012 was not trying to be a very PC, well-rounded, in-depth piece. Well, Noel, you said it, not me. Calling it outright a non-academic, not well-rounded, not in-depth piece about a warlord who employs child soldiers. Like, what? It's also important to note that in March of 2012, the internet was a much less cynical place. Hard to imagine, I know. For the most part, people took what they saw online at face value. The term catfishing, the idea that someone could create an entirely false character online in contrast to who they were in real life, was a new concept that didn't yet have a widespread. And for many young viewers, the data presented in the documentary warranted no further investigation. By this point in the film, they were moved by Jacob's story and emotionally anchored by Russell's baby son as the entry point. Those who were taken by the message were already on the side of Invisible Children by the time celebrities came on board to share that message. In just 6 days, Kony 2012 garnered over 100 million views on YouTube. That is absurd by today's standards. That is unheard of in 2012. It was the first ever YouTube video to reach 1 million likes. And as you could imagine, the website crashed. Former Invisible Children member Jedediah Jenkins remembers the launch of the video. Quote, in the first 24 hours, I think we had 1 million views. We wanted 500,000 in a year. And with that, Invisible Children had gone global. Russell went on CNN, BBC, and ABC news outlets, while Jenkins, along with the other staffers at Invisible Children, received dozens of phone calls. One of those phone calls was from Rihanna, you know, a famous person. Jenkins recalls that conversation, quote, she was like, I've never been so moved. I want to do anything you tell me. I want to meet you. The foundation was laid out across America prior to Kony 2012, as Invisible Children screenings showing the film told attendees to share the video once it was published online. Another important factor that helped spread the film was Facebook's newsfeed. Prior to 2006, Facebook users were largely limited to messages, photo uploads, and other profile information on their wall, and would have to navigate through individual profiles to see updates from friends. The platform was a static experience with limited public activity, as the core of the site was individual profiles rather than a central stream of activities from a user's network. The newsfeed, only a few years old at this point, meant that it was impossible to avoid Kony 2012 for anyone that used the platform. If your cousin, your ex, or your former high school math teacher shared the film, you were going to see it. Invisible Children wanted a way to monetize the sudden publicity and views. Well, as Tom Cruise says in Jerry Maguire,
show me the money!
Remember those action boxes? The ones with the poster and the bracelet for the Cover the Night event? Well, people bought them. A lot of people bought them. According to Jenkins, they sold around 1 million of them at $25 per action box. That is approximately a lot of money. This sudden surge of income allowed Invisible Children to ramp up its on-the-ground work in Africa as well as hire more staff. At its peak, the group had up to 300 people, including interns, volunteers, and short-term workers, according to NPR. The online success of Kony 2012 was a testament to Jason Russell's plan, which was carefully crafted through the production process. The final film clocks in at 29 minutes and 58 seconds long, which was intentional. Russell and the team had studied other successful viral videos in order to understand what made them popular. For example, one long-form video on popular video hosting platform Vimeo was a documentary about fans of the Insane Clown Posse called American Juggalo. That video ran just over 23 minutes, and after studying it, Kony's creative team came to the conclusion that anything starting with a 2 was viable. Although successful longer videos, especially over 30 minutes, tended to have higher total watch times, sub-30-minute videos experienced higher average view percentages and were better for engagement and audience retention. The original version of Kony 2012 had been 31 minutes long. And while the online response was exciting, Invisible Children wasn't prepared for this much press. Invisible Children CEO Ben Kesey said, quote, "If you're going to release a video that gets 100 million views, your PR needs to be bigger than one intern." While Facebook's news feed helped Kony 2012, other emerging online features provided a new set of problems for Invisible Children. YouTube, for instance, had recently begun rolling out the suggested feature, which, true to its name, suggested the next video for users to watch. While it's difficult to imagine such an essential part of today's YouTube viewing experience being new or non-existent, the suggested video function was still in its early days. And for Kony 2012, the experimental new YouTube feature actually worked against it. See, for many viewers, the next suggested video that showed up at the end of Kony 2012 was a response to it. The video, uploaded by someone with the username Sanyu, was 5 minutes and 46 seconds long and featured a young girl talking into the camera to address her audience. In the video, the girl reveals that she and her parents are all from Uganda and contradicts the claims about Joseph Kony made in the documentary. Notably, Sanyu claimed that Joseph Kony was already dead, and that the LRA had not been Uganda's main threat since at least 2 years prior in 2010. The main source of Ugandan oppression and terror in the region, according to Sanyu, was actually the Islamist extremist terrorist group Al-Qaeda. Sanyu's response undermined Kony 2012 and confused viewers. In essence, Sanyu was telling the internet that Kony 2012 was nothing but a false alarm. For Invisible Children, this was an incredible blow. They had just spent nearly 30 minutes educating people about a person and a crisis they didn't even know existed, only to have it easily taken apart by someone who lived in the region in question. After this video dropped, posts on social media, especially on Twitter and Facebook, questioned the intent and accuracy of Kony 2012. One Twitter user, at Audra the Rapper, posted, quote, "Kony hasn't been seen in 4 years. His army hasn't done anything in 6 years." While Ugandan journalist and activist Rosebel Kagumira posted a video stating, quote, "I think we need to have a kind of sound, intelligent campaign geared toward real policy shifts, rather than an adverse, sensationalized story that is out to make just one person cry." The pushback to the film spread quickly, and sites like Gawker, Reductress, and the New York Post were quick to jump on the story. People began protesting outside of the Invisible Children office. They had signs, they had loudspeakers. To these protesters, Invisible Children was making far too much money and gaining far too much notoriety off what they deemed a gigantic scam. This was new territory for Invisible Children. After years of enthusiasm and support, they were getting the opposite. And although they had faced criticism before, this was different. And there was also, a lot of it. Jedediah Jenkins would later talk about how foreign this felt, saying, quote, "We weren't used to getting hate." In the midst of the criticism, Jenkins remembers feeling like all those years of work that so many people had put in was now over. People no longer seemed to care about Invisible Children's intention behind the film. All they saw was a bunch of white kids in San Diego trying to end a war in Uganda by throwing performative events to garner likes and views on social media. And this was the crux of what was perhaps the most damaging criticism: that Invisible Children was not only playing into the white savior trope, but a lazy version of it. The gist of the trope revolves around what some feel is a common Western narrative, that Africa is nothing more than warlords, lawlessness, and endless human rights violations. A scar on the consciousness of the world, as UK Prime Minister Tony Blair once said. As The Guardian described it, the documentary was, quote, leaning heavily on people's existing biases about the continent. It was easy to trust that a man had walked freely through this chaotic jungle for 20 years, murdering young children, because that was just the sort of thing that happened in Africa. This is evidenced in the film, as very few Ugandans are showcased at all. And the few who are, including Jacob, are given little screen time. When we are introduced to Jacob, it is through the lens of Russell's own child, who happens to be American and white. We aren't given Jacob's surname, and he's presented only as he relates to Russell. Jacob is a friend in Africa, as Russell says. Throughout the film, multiple instances showcase the centering of Russell and invisible children over Ugandans. And the film visually portrays Ugandans in darkness, such as the night commuters sleeping together in the room, while the American activists are depicted heroically, brightly cloaked in light. Like when they're showing the Ugandan kids, you can almost feel the Sarah McLachlan song about to kick in. Nigerian essayist Teju Cole tweeted, quote, the white savior supports brutal policies in the morning, founds charities in the afternoon, and receives awards in the evening. Perhaps one thing Kony 12 did do is, in the aftermath of the film's release, Uganda suffered its biggest drop in tourism revenue in over 10 years. Because yeah, the movie's saying it's a country where warlords are kidnapping children left and right. Why would you want to go there? Another criticism was that at the time of the film's release, Kony and the LRA had already moved out of Uganda and into surrounding countries. Kony 2012 was called out for being misleading and for, according to The Guardian, quote, grossly overstating the then size and reach of the LRA, which had dwindled in the years leading up to the film's release. As for the campaign itself, the oversimplification of boiling decades of socio-political history down to a 29-minute video could be seen as doing very little beyond raising money and publicity for invisible children. Kony 2012 set into motion this message that, in this world, there is a terrible problem, and that you, the viewer, are the solution. All you have to do is share the video and maybe, potentially, if you feel like it, donate some money. Like The Atlantic suggests, viewers can donate from the comfort of their homes and cars. They have done all that's necessary. They are absolved of responsibility. The oversimplification of both problem and solution helped create what is known as slacktivism, or empty activism for the sake of activism. The fact that this campaign was treated as a push-button solution to being the change you wish to see in the world equated sharing a video with actually making a difference. In other words, virtue signaling before that was the term. As the Crime Justice Journal describes it, quote, predominantly Western global elites and those with the capacity to engage with digital technologies which hold the privilege of the morally superior global savior. And the heroism associated with slacktivism is why online activism is so attractive. It's more effective in making participants feel good about themselves than actually achieving goals. In the documentary, Russell states, quote, who are you to end a war? I am here to tell you. Who are you not to? Which is, for one, not only cringy and dumb, but it overstates an individual's ability to effect change in a next to no effort. He says that you have the capability to end the war and prevent child soldiers, and his call to action at the end of all of this is to buy their poster. There's perhaps no better roast of both the white savior and slacktivism concept than the fictional character Aldous Snow in the 2010 comedy Get Him to the Greek. In his music video for his hit single African Child, Aldous, in a white gown, strides through the middle of an unnamed, war-torn African village with guerrilla soldiers exchanging gunfire as he sings about the little African child trapped in me. Snow, who likens himself to a white African space Christ, is later ripped apart by the news, media, and fans who call his song the, quote, single worst thing to happen to Africa since apartheid. This movie came out 2 years prior to Kony 2012, making it all the more funny. Now, here's the real spicy stuff. All the mistakes they've done before you could chalk up to stupidity or like being overeager, but this is where it gets scary. Invisible Children's funding and spending was largely unsustainable and arguably ineffective, as much of it went towards spreading efforts in America as opposed to supporting on-the-ground initiatives in African countries. An article from The Atlantic questioned whether the money received by Invisible Children should have gone to actually effective campaigns or more experienced nonprofit organizations. The campaign itself focused more on bracelets and social media rather than putting resources towards more effective advocacy. This contributed to the growing belief that Invisible Children was less about the children in the company's namesake and more about growing the notoriety of director and co-founder of Invisible Children, Jason Russell. In just over a week, Invisible Children went from phone calls with celebrities wanting to support their cause to emergency meetings assessing damage control. And this weighed most heavily on the film's director, Jason Russell, who was doing non-stop press in an attempt to put out the fires. Jenkins witnessed firsthand the mental toll this was all taking on Russell. Quote, "He didn't sleep for like 7 days, and then ultimately, right as we're plugging holes and like trying to do our best, it breaks his brain, and then he's having a full mental health crisis." On Thursday, March 15th, 2012, San Diego PD received numerous calls that a man, Jason Russell, was running through a neighborhood in his underwear, screaming incoherently, disrupting traffic, and making sexual gestures. And yes, there is a video. In a statement shared by San Diego police spokeswoman Lieutenant Andrew Brown, quote, "One caller reported that the male had removed his underwear and was nude, perhaps masturbating, but that was not confirmed by responding officers. The callers reported the underwear-clad male was in the street, interfering with traffic, yelling incoherently, and pounding his fist on the sidewalk. Several people in the area tried to calm the man, but he continued to act in a bizarre and irrational manner." Russell was taken to a medical facility for evaluation and treatment. News quickly found its way back to headquarters as TMZ got a hold of the video and told Invisible Children they would give them 2 hours to figure out what to do with the information. Changing their minds immediately, TMZ released the video within 10 minutes. One staffer recalls, quote, "There were a lot of tears and confusion, and I don't know, I remember feeling it's just over, like everything's just done." Ben Kesey, Invisible Children's CEO, publicly responded to Russell's breakdown, stating, quote, "Jason Russell was unfortunately hospitalized yesterday suffering from exhaustion, dehydration, and malnutrition. He is now receiving medical care and is focused on getting better. The past 2 weeks have taken a severe emotional toll on all of us, Jason especially, and that toll manifested itself in an unfortunate incident yesterday." For those who viewed Russell as self-serving, this was perhaps satisfactory retribution and validation that the people behind Kony 2012 were shams. But for Invisible Children, the timing of Russell's public meltdown could not have been worse. Not only had they faced intense blowback from the documentary, but Cover the Night was also only a month away. You know, the whole put up posters on every street in the world. April 20th came, and on a night in which every major city in the world was supposed to be blanketed with Kony's face and name, the turnout was underwhelming to say the least. The gathering in Vancouver had 17 people. Another in Brisbane had less than 50. The campaign also tanked on Twitter. One tweet said, quote, "I find the silence around Kony 2012 interesting. It's muted embarrassment from prior supporters, mixed with quiet smugness from detractors." That summed it up pretty well. Teens and young people who were interested in the event faced backlash for not being able to articulate or answer the realities of the movement's criticisms. A rival page, Kony 2012 UK, which opposed military action against the LRA, had picked up thousands of likes. Suddenly, being an anti-Kony activist didn't have the trendiness or appeal it once did, and the enthusiasm to capture Joseph Kony, which the American military and President Obama had been unable to do, waned along with it. You know, again, if he's even alive. Like most high-profile public breakdowns, Russell's episode ended up being parodied in the animated sitcom South Park. One of its main characters, Stan, has a breakdown and heads to San Diego to let off some steam, accompanied by a song titled "Jackin' It in San Diego." Classy as always, South Park. In October, later that year, Russell would appear in an interview on Oprah's Next Chapter, where he explained to Oprah that, despite popular online theories, he was not on drugs at the time of the incident. Which, okay. I've seen people have mental breakdowns before, and I've seen people have mental breakdowns where they do things similar to what you're talking about before. And the latter always involves some substance. On April 5th, 2012, 1 month after the Kony 2012 campaign, Invisible Children published a follow-up video titled Kony 2012 Part 2 Beyond Famous. The 19-minute, 47-second film begins with a montage of major Western news stations and popular political pundits saying that Kony 2012 manipulates the facts, is pro-war activism, utterly naive, and is white Westerners getting on a bandwagon and they haven't got a clue what they're talking about. This is immediately followed by clips of Ugandan politicians and humanitarian organizations praising Kony 2012 for providing awareness. It lays out the support from bipartisan resolutions from the House of Representatives and the Senate to disarm the LRA, one of which was later passed unanimously. It includes the approval from the Peace and Security Council of the African Union to launch a 5,000-man regional force dedicated to tracking down Kony, who along with the LRA was believed to be terrorizing and kidnapping children from the Congo. The film also showed a pivot from Invisible Children's initial strategy. Instead of the on-the-ground work in the United States, they began turning their efforts towards Uganda itself. What a crazy idea, and left flyers in locations where the LRA was thought to be operating. These flyers included instructions for young soldiers on how to escape their captors. Visible Children also began building rehab centers for families and children displaced by the LRA. The follow-up film showcased Jason Russell far less than its predecessor, I wonder why, and was instead narrated by Ben Kesey. The film mostly features input from Ugandans dealing with the conflict. In contrast to Kony 2012 shots of Ugandan children huddled together in a large room to sleep, the follow-up film showed them happy and smiling. To this day, Kony is still at large, if he's even alive. He kind of dropped off the face of the earth, and if you just die in the middle of the jungle, that's what would happen. 2 years later, in 2014, Russell, who stayed with the organization until its transition to a policy-based organization in 2015, admitted to NPR that Invisible Children had cut its full-time staff in half since the peak of the campaign. Quote, "It's always challenging to let people go that are your friends." In March of 2017, Marine Corps General Thomas D. Waldhauser, commander of U.S. forces in Africa, withdrew African troops from Uganda and from the mission of Kony's arrest. In the early days of Invisible Children, at those school screenings where Ugandan team members shared their stories with the audience, it's easy to overlook what was happening in real time. These Ugandans were reliving the most horrific trauma of their lives, and former staffer Jedediah Jenkins wished that there was some sort of therapy or psychological help available to them. And when asked what he would do differently, Jenkins responded on both Russell and Invisible Children, quote, "I would protect my friend from being that exposed and in the limelight. I would have a suite of information explaining our programs ready to go for people that wanted to learn more." When Invisible Children shifted to more direct aid efforts in 2015, Jason Russell stepped down from the organization and moved on from the spotlight. He's happy and surrounded by friends, according to a TEDx video from 2016. Kony 2012 was an interesting experiment in social behavior. The timing of Twitter and Instagram's booming popularity, the growing transformation of YouTube, and a generation of young teenagers and adults taught that change and hope are not only possible, but morally necessary, served as a catalyst to propel a cultural moment into a global phenomenon. It's also fascinating to see the ways in which this online movement affected change in the real world. How effective those changes were is debatable, but at the end of the day, Invisible Children did shine a light on a terrible person committing horrible atrocities. And if they were successful in saving the life of even one child, then it's hard to see how anyone could say it wasn't worth it. So, maybe we can be techno-optimist after all. It's still a very stupid word. And that's about everything for the story of Kony 2012. A very weird, very different time in the internet that I wanted to talk about, and thankfully you wanted to listen, and I think that's really cool, and we just want to say thank you for watching. I vaguely remember hearing about Kony 2012 as a kid. I was only 12 years old, so, it wasn't like I was doing much, but I remember hearing adults talk about it. But it's something that's just so weird by today's standards, and again, I had to tell someone. So hopefully you enjoyed this video, and thank you for sticking around. Thank you for the support on all the channels. Thank you so much for the support and love you guys have shown the team over here. Everyone who worked on the video will be credited in the description below. Be sure to show them some love. New content on the way, but I believe that should do it for now. But before I go, we just want to say thank you for watching. We hope that you enjoyed, and we'll see you in the next one. Bye. Also in 2006, Invisible Children tried another program to raise awareness for what was happening in Uganda. This is well before Kony 2012. It was called Dance for Uganda, and it yeah.